Good morning, afternoon, evening, Tyler. How are you?
Not too bad. Do you know what's crazy? It's almost 5.
Yeah.
I haven't done this in so long, but I have a customer who's an attorney and he has a rental building that's a commercial building, and I have to go after this to work
Wait.
because I
Oh,
can
you have to
only
go to work after this.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
I can only work off hours there. And I was
Oh,
like,
really?
yeah, like I was gonna say
What
no.
time will you work till?
I don't know. It's a weird project. Like they completely renovated the downstairs.
Hmm.
Like a very expensive project. Like with the commercial properties, it's tenant fit out, so it's a
Yeah.
healthcare space, and there's a lot of expensive equipment, and there's a utility room upstairs that they have all the overflows draining into a drain, but
Hmm.
like the floor's not pitched at all, so the overflows are fine, but they had one of the pipes burst before, and like the floor's not pitched to the drain, so it just goes downstairs. So essentially I'm putting like a shower in this
Hmm.
closet, so that if there's an issue down the road, so it's something that like they want to get done and it has to be off hours work. So I was gonna say no, but it's a return customer and
Yeah.
like he's been wanting to do it. So I was like, all right, I'll do it. So I don't know what time it's one of those things where like I'll get it done this week.
Yeah.
After hours. I'm not gonna like work through the night. I'm
I
too
haven't
old for
done.
that shit.
I mean, I haven't physically worked much in a while, but the off hour stuff, I remember, especially early on in my career, I always felt like not like I didn't feel like a
Bonus
bad.
money.
But it was just like you felt like you were just going above and beyond that day. It's like, yeah, everyone's home from work and I'm
Yeah.
killing it. And I remember I had this, we did this kitchen renovation. This was actually before I started my company. And he was like, hey, need this kitchen renovated. You can work whenever you want. It's vacant. We're just going to put it on the market when you're done. And I would go there. I leave work at 4 or 5, and I get there at 6 or 7. I'd work until like midnight or 1.
Yeah.
And I did the demo myself, and it was when Breaking Bad was a show,
Yeah.
and I was full Tyvek suit, respirator, goggles, and I was walking in and out of this house with bags
Yeah.
and
At
just
like 1 in the
stacking up.
morning.
Yeah, at 1 in the morning. And my buddy Chris was with me. I'm like, man, why haven't the cops showed up?
Yeah.
Like this is super, like we have construction lights set up inside. It was just super sketchy. But
Yeah.
that,
With like everything going on social wise, and then I'm like getting paid to create scopes and develop some pre-construction for projects. I was like, I could use working, and like the most ideal time for it right now is actually after hours,
yeah.
other than the fact that like I'm missing softball a couple of nights this week.
Hmm.
But I was like, all right, it'll feel good to get out and work a little bit. So after this, that's what I'm doing.
Unrelated to all of that, we got Charles from 323 Woodwork on today. We met
We
him in
do.
the Builder show. He
Nice Mississippi gentleman.
nice Mississippi gentleman. He is. He's got a I mean, we go down a handful of rabbit holes, but really talk about his woodworking and cabinetry business and how he's, kind of carved his way in his market and faced the challenges. And he talks about bringing in, cabinet lines as a product to kind of offset and create the ability to be more profitable as a company. But he opens up and talks, pretty, what I think a lot of us and you guys might struggle with is, making those first hires and realizing that you're not billing them out high enough, and you get to you get to year 1 or 2 of having employees and you're wondering why you're making a smaller net profit. So good listen.
Yeah, Charles was great. I mess around with him a little bit at the end of the podcast, but really well spoken, super insightful. The first time I met him was when Nick and I were basically packing up from IBS and getting ready to go, and then sat there for like 2 hours and spoke with him. So he has a lot to say. I feel like it was all really useful and valuable perspective and information, and we're definitely going to look to get him on again. So I would also like to know, I know we said that we wanted to get a bunch more of the owner operator, smaller business types on, I feel that this is the conversation that a lot of you guys have been wanting. So definitely let us know.
Let Andersen guide you into the customer's dream indoor-outdoor living space with their exquisite selection of patio doors. Whether your customers envision seamless transitions or stunning focal points, they have the perfect door to complement any lifestyle.
Need help with selection or just curious about the options? We've got you covered with the new patio door selection guide. From sleek modern designs to timeless classics, Andersen's expert advice and tips will ensure a simplified decision-making process. Learn more at andersenwindows.com/patio door selection guide.
Are you ready to close jobs in half the time? What about improve your productivity by 50% or maybe scale to 8 figures? Those are some crazy, crazy goals. But
Yeah, I'm loftier than I may be at this point, but there's a lot of people out there who want more with their business than I do. Thousands of builders like you, or maybe not like me, but like you, are already doing this, and you can too with Buildertrend. If you've heard of them before, you may assume they're just project management software. Well, think again.
not only does Buildertrend offer the tools for sales, project, customer, and financial management, but they also do advanced reporting and analytics, material rebates. Material rebates is super cool. They've been partnering with a bunch of vendors and manufacturers to get those rebates back right in the pockets of people like us. They also handle online payments, cash back on business purchases. They hold monthly conferences. They do in-person consulting. And most recently, I believe, because this is new to me, is they offer financing and insurance options. Yeah, the list goes on.
Oh, it does. So whether you've tried them in the past or you're just hearing about them now, get over to buildertrend.com/MC demo to learn more about how to run and grow your entire business in one place.
Charles, how are you, man?
I'm
Dude,
good.
it was good to run into you. What was it, the last day of the Builder Show that we ran into you?
Yeah. I think it was the last day, Thursday. Yeah, it was good.
Was that your first time at the
Finally get to
show?
meet y'all. No, I was there last year.
Yeah.
And it just made a lot of connections. Like, I think that the best thing about the show was just the people that I met, and all the stuff there is secondary,
Yeah.
But
That's what I tell everyone. It's like you see all this stuff, especially with social media. It's like you see all the product. So maybe you go there to touch and feel some of it, but it's totally for, interacting with people that you probably already interact with,
right.
just not in person.
Yeah, I got to meet so John Hilgenberg and I do basically the same thing in two different parts of the country, and we've gotten to be friends. I met him first last year, and so he was super helpful in between last show and this show, and getting cabinet sales going and stuff. And so just connections like that, and getting to be friends with folks, it's super great. And I was able to also meet with some local builders who we work with who went to the show, but it was kind of like time away from all the craziness, and go to dinner with them and really, talk to them and get to know them a little bit more. And that was really helpful as well.
I think that's the nice part about any, event like that, where you're removing yourself from the day to day.
Right.
Maybe you're doing a little work on your phone or answering emails, but otherwise it's like you are removed from the environment, and you can have, it's almost like you can have more of a human conversation with someone.
Right.
Yeah,
for sure.
On the job site, it's all like, all right, what do you got to get done? I need you to do this. I need you to do that. And like you said, you're able to sit down around a meal and kind of just chat high level.
Yeah, for sure.
So
how does this go? Does Tyler got a giant list of questions? We talk about all kind of random stuff.
Pretty much random.
It's mostly off the cuff. So we had said not that long ago, where it's like, I want to get some more of the contractor belt on owner operator type companies on. I know that we ran into you at IBS and discussed podcasts and everything else. But I think, being that, I mean, you have a fairly large Instagram following, but let's just say that not everyone knows, or let's pretend that not everyone knows who you are. So I think it'd be good to just preface the conversation a little bit about yourself and some background, and then Nick and I will probably interrupt you with some questions as you go.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
I feel like
So
this is like an old school podcast.
yeah, I loved those. I think I've listened to most of them since the beginning. It's been great. So yeah, my name is Charles Kinard. Everybody says Kinard, but it's Kinard. And
I definitely said Kinard as I typed
yeah.
it into the podcast chat today.
Hey,
Kinard.
that's everybody always says it, so it's okay. So basically, I live in Olive Branch, Mississippi, which is a suburb of Memphis, so just south of the Tennessee line right there. We sell and install high-end residential cabinetry. I have owned my own business since 2010, so about 14 years. To get into carpentry, I was homeschooled growing up. And on Wednesdays, there was a guy that I started working with when I was about 14 who built fences and decks. And he would like hire kids and pay them cash like $4 an hour to come help him tote concrete and 2x4s. Man, it was great. Like that's where I learned to work. And I worked for him for probably 4 or 5 years till I graduated high school. And just learned so much. He was like a second dad to me, but also realized that I really liked the more fine carpentry, like the more detailed it was, the more I like it. And so I got the nickname Quality Control from him because I'd be like, Mr. Mark, that don't look good. We can't leave it like that. He'd be like, I'll just put a trim board on it. It's going to be okay. And so, but yeah, that's how I got into carpentry. And then I went to work for a guy who was an interior trim contractor. Did that for about a year and a half. We built a house over a summer for some friends of his. So that was a really great experience. And then after that, I started working for a local custom cabinet shop doing high-end residential cabinetry. Started out working with in their installation crew, ended up running 3 installation crews for them and doing specialty work in the shop in between. And then they got shut down in 2010 after the crash. Started doing commercial work, couldn't get paid, et cetera, et cetera. Had to give it up. And so my boss was like, hey, you need to work for yourself. We've got this big job and we can't do it because we're shutting down. You need to do it and build this big giant desk for a church down in Florida. And that's like what put me into business. And so mostly did installation work for the past 12, 13 years, really focusing on just subbing to local designers and custom shops. And then about a year ago, started selling cabinets.
No college?
Nope. I did take my high school year. I did some like dual credits. And so got like the first semester of college in. And, but after that, it was just work.
What do your parents do?
So my dad, he worked in the cottonseed industry for like 25 years and he's retired now. My mom was homeschool mom.
What do you, if you work in the cottonseed industry, what, like literally selling to farmers?
No. So he worked for an association, which was kind of like a liaison with the cotton industry. And so he would go to all these shows and stuff and try to help them with like marketing and like understanding all the different things that cottonseed can be used for. Like it's amazing. There's cottonseed oil and the lint and the fibers and the husks, and they use it in feed and just all kind of stuff. So it's really interesting.
That is interesting. I was unaware. Yep. So your parents never really pushed you to go to college?
No, not really. They were just kind of like, whatever you want to do. I was, early on, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I was thinking, originally, honestly, I wanted to go join the Air Force. I wanted to fly F-22s. I wanted to get my degree in aerospace engineering and then go work for Lockheed Skunk Works. And then I met my now wife when I was 19 and decided I would rather be married than shot at. And so now I'm a carpenter.
You got married when you were 19?
No, I met her when I was 19. I got
Okay.
married when I was 23.
Okay. Yeah. You waited a little bit longer.
Yep.
What is your area like? Do you feel that your path was similar to a lot of young men and women where you're from?
Like in regard to getting into the trades, or in
Yeah, and
regard to just in general?
yeah, like I feel that from where I am, going straight from high school and getting into the trades, I would assume that I'm 38, that you're somewhere around my age.
Mhm.
That like for me, it wasn't super common. And
Mhm.
I'm just curious. I don't know anything about the Mississippi area or even Memphis to know, like, is that typical for where you're from, or are you somewhat of an anomaly, or was it like looked down on?
Um, I would say in the immediate circles that I was in, it wasn't looked down on, but it was also, I think I always knew that when I was working for somebody else, like at that time, I wasn't making a sustainable long-term living. I was like $14 an hour or
Yeah.
something. And when the ended up shutting down and trying to save everything, moved the shop 2 hours away. They actually bought a building instead of leasing the one they were in because their lease was going up so much. And they were like, "Hey, do you want to move over here and work?" And I was like, "Well, what are you paying?" "Oh, the same as what you're paying now. We'll pay you like 14 something dollars an hour." And I'm like, "I don't move 2 hours away for $14 an hour." Um, so it was hard for me to be able to see how to make a really good living, just like working for a cabinet shop or doing trim or something like that. And when, but I'd never really thought about working for myself because I love the guys I worked for so much. I didn't want to
Yeah.
like go in a competition with them. And so I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And so really the Lord just kind of worked it out. So it's like, kick me out of the nest. Here you go. Now you're going to start working for yourself. And I've loved it. It's been great most
So
days.
yeah, most days I feel like it's give or take. What was it when you were younger and working this job for this fencing and decking contractor? What was it about that really made you? It seems like you fell in love with the trade and working with your hands at that point. What was it about that really you made a connection with?
And I think the biggest thing was just being able to start out with like a 16-foot trailer load of lumber. And at the end of the day, there's like a fence or a deck sitting there. Like
Yeah.
seeing that accomplishment and being able to work super hard and have something done at the end of the day was like really, really gratifying.
So then,
I think that's the appeal of this industry, and I think a lot of people bring it back to that, is just like the gratifying moment of standing back and seeing something that you can physically touch and create. I remember like there was this one specific project. This is going to sound ridiculous because it was a tiny little small project for a church actually that needed some handrails to get up on their stage, and they reached out to me, and I remember I wasn't I wasn't really a woodworker. I was always building things and maybe doing some cabinetry, but I never considered myself a woodworker. And it was the first time that I had ordered rough sawn. It was red oak, but rough sawn material dropped off in my shop, and I took it from rough sawn material to finished, stained, polyed, and installed. And I remember, like to this day, I remember that feeling of like, man, this is so cool what I get to do. Like you taking rough, material and turning it into something and standing back and being like, look what I did.
Mm-hmm.
And that feeling is hard. I mean, I feel like that's like the drug, right? Like that's the you
Mm-hmm.
chase. It's like you chase that feeling where anytime you do something, you kind of take that step back away and look at it and be like, all right,
Mm-hmm.
did I do what I wanted? Is it accomplishing what I had hoped? And I think that's hard to replicate in a lot of other fields.
it
Yeah.
is, and
Yeah.
that like works as a child, and but then it is the classic case, and it sounds like that you ran into that, Charles, where it's like, all right, now where? like I'm still at $14 an hour. What do I do with this? And you ended up, for whatever reason, going down the path of like, hey, I'm going to start my own business, which seems like a pretty natural progression, at least with the most of the people who I speak with my business arrangement and the setup that I'm in. It's like the reason why most of us are in business is because we just capped out. Like there wasn't an opportunity to make more money, and this was the only way that we saw fit to do that.
And I think that that's, that's really tough. And I think that that's one thing that I'm trying to change in the little ways that I can, in the sense that I am trying to pay my guys an actual wage that they can live on, and give them a path to say, like, we have like 6 different apprentice levels that you go to, from like, assistant to lead carpenter, and the top pay, like you can support a family on one income with it. But that also means that we have to charge a good bit more than a lot of our competition, which makes that, difficult. But I don't want guys to be struggling, like I was. And you can't support a family on $14 an hour, of course that was, 14 years ago. It's different now, but can't support a family on 20 now.
So one thing, like when you first started your business, was it just you? What was the setup like?
Yeah, it was me by myself for about 3 years. So I was just installing cabinets by myself. The first year after it shut down, my old boss and his son, they were partners in the business, but basically us 3 all had our own separate businesses, and we were just subbing work to each other. Anytime we would find work, we would sub to the other 2, and whoever got the job would take a cut off the top, and we'd split however many hours we worked between us. And then after that, I got hooked up with a couple of local shops and was just doing installation work for them. And so for about 3 years, until I hired my first guy, and that was really scary. That's when I decided I needed to get a CPA. I needed to figure out, like, how do I do this payroll thing, make sure I'm doing all my taxes right.
Was that before or after you hired the employee?
That was about the same time. So until that time, I'd always just done my own taxes and stuff. And because it wasn't very complicated, and I enjoyed like the business kind of aspect, the accounting, I've always been pretty good with money. And so I enjoyed that part of it. But once it came to like, I've got to hire somebody, I'm responsible for somebody else, payroll, all of those things, I had to pull in somebody to help. And that was really, really good, because it's, got a payroll processor that just, they pull out, they pay all the taxes, they pull out and direct deposit. And I hardly have to do anything except just enter in hours.
Were you making money when you first hired that employee, like on them?
A little bit. So, man, that's been a really big journey. So the first employee, I was probably making better money on, like, I didn't know what to charge. I was like, I guess I'll charge half of what I'm charging for myself, because that seems fair, because he's doing about half of the amount of work. And so that's what we did. And I think at the time I was charging like $70 an hour or something, and like $35 for him. And then I don't know what I was paying him. Not a lot. $12-15 an hour or something. But he was green. Like, I mean, literally knew nothing, like had to teach him how to read a tape measure kind of thing. And he worked with me for 8 years and ended up being like, he's a better carpenter than I am now. About That's 2 years ago, he got married, moved away. So that was tough.
No.
Yeah.
Try and break up the marriage.
Yeah. Dude, my wife's the one that hooked him up.
Oh, sabotage.
And he was like, yeah, she lives in Missouri. I think we're going to move up there. I was like, no, man. Like, I was saving up to buy another van and all this stuff, had all these grand plans, and nah.
So the reason that I asked that is I speak to a lot of people who are similar to my situation. They're a small company, and they go on their own. They don't really realize how much money they're making or not making. And then they hire somebody because that's like the next reasonable step. And then they don't, that like convolutes the numbers to the point where they really have no idea what they're making. They don't know what to charge. And then it's like they start burying themselves. And rather than step back and understand the numbers and how they're bidding things and what their market will bear, they just keep piling work on top to try and sustain. And it just like digs this really deep hole for them that really makes it tough to crawl out of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Because I would say about 3 years ago, I guess it was the end of 2020, going into 2021, I had hired like I think I had 4 guys working for me at that point. And I was like, hey, I can pay this guy $12 an hour and charge $20 an hour. That means I'm making $8 an hour. I was like, and I hired all these guys. And at the end of a couple of years, I looked back at my P&Ls and was like, I made the same net profit at the end of this year having 4 guys as I did 3 years ago when I have 1 guy. And I was like, what is going on? Like, because I was like, why does it feel like we've got so much work? We're so busy and I have no money.
Yeah.
And so I actually had a guy at my church who's in commercial banking and does profitability analysis on business for commercial loans. And he helped me go through all of my P&Ls and stuff for the past several years and was like, dude, your margins when it was just you and 1 guy were like so much higher. And now your margins are like in a third. It's no wonder you're not making any money. And so that sent me down this whole journey of like figuring out I need to raise prices, but not knowing what to raise them to, like how to do that, being afraid I'm going to lose work and lose business doing that.
So were your margins being inaccurate due to the number that you were charging per hour or not capturing the correct amount of hours?
So I was doing all of our work was hourly. So it was my hourly rate. So the majority of my work in the entirety of my business has been hourly. So all of our work has just been so custom that it's been really hard to give a fixed cost. And so most of our clients knew about what we would charge per day and would just budget that into a job and we just bill them for our time.
So were you giving, sorry, I don't mean to keep on interrupting. Were you giving them a budgeted amount of days that you thought the job was going to take?
So sometimes yes, sometimes no. That became a problem later on. But it was kind of like they had so much work going on. They didn't want to take the time to send me drawings and get them to give me an estimate. So they were just spitballing it. And then when it took longer than they thought, they would be upset. And so that was kind of like a whole thing.
I think this is what a lot of people run into. I think this is what you were saying, Tyler, a minute ago, but like people scale and hire people and take on a ton of work. And it's easy to get fixated on like that revenue number. And, and even for myself personally, like I've been in a position where it's like I'm looking at revenue and then realizing that the net profit is the same, or sometimes it's less. And you go down this rabbit hole of like, I don't understand, like we're doing more work. Why wouldn't we make more money? And you realize that it's, it costs more as you're adding these people. And the more, when you go into it not understanding what like an employee truly costs, it's now, well, times that by every employee, and it just compounds and compounds and compounds, and it puts you in this backward momentum so quickly that now it becomes, it becomes an issue. It goes from being super profitable as a small 1-2-man show to being now like upside down because you have too many people and you're not charging enough for that hourly rate. And I think, as you're alluding to, it's like it's not as clean to understand how much an employee costs by just what you're paying them. And we've talked about this before, but it's there's so much that goes into that employee. And for me, we've done this whole like labor burden analysis, and we update it every 6 months, and we sit down and we look at what everyone's making and then audit everything that goes along with them. And recently we went through and I was like, man, like some of these positions and some of these people, in the pay scale or the pay the billable rate in which they're kind of captured, they're almost exceeding it now, where it's like we're making very little margin on them. And it's as though we need to increase our billable rates. Because everything, like silly things that you don't think of, I feel like I just talked about this on another episode, but it's like the $8 a month that you pay to have a custom email. It's like Google's going to charge you $8 a month for every custom email you want. So there's $8 a month. It's like, sure, that doesn't sound like a lot of money, but you start adding it up, and next thing you have, it's $80 a month when you have 10 employees. And it's like, that's not technically an overhead. That's part of the cost of having that person on your team. I think that those are the things that, when they're not captured early, they compound very quickly when you start scaling.
Yeah. What I ended up having to do after all that happened and talking to a lot of people and finding out, like Memphis is a suppressed market from a labor rate standpoint already. So I was kind of had to find out what people are charging in Knoxville and like other places outside of our area, which is a little bit higher. But once I kind of got an idea of what other people were charging, so I didn't feel like I was crazy with the number that I felt like I needed to charge, I made this whole spreadsheet that I could enter in like our average overhead as a percentage of gross profit from the past several years. And then I could plug in my labor rates, the average amount of hours that I think everybody's going to work per year. And then every time I would add an employee, it would take like 200 hours of my billable time in the field and move it to admin, because I can't spend that time in the field anymore, because the more employees I have means I've got to spend less time in the field with billable work, and I have to spend more time. So once I did all that, I was able to have a multiplier on each billable rate that would tell me in a whole year how much is my profit, like bottom line, how much am I going to make, and try to get that in the green, obviously. But so that's where, I'm thinking about now. A lot of people will do a markup on their labor rate, which I know is more from like a contractor standpoint, but I have that markup is like already built into my rate.
Yeah.
So that if we work a full, 40 hours a week for a whole year, the business is going to be profitable for that year. And so now that we're selling cabinets, it's like this whole different dynamic of trying to figure out where I do that markup, if that's the proper way of capturing it, or if I need to be having a real, like, it's more than my burden labor rate, because it includes profit and retained earnings and all of those things. So anyway, that's just stuff I'm thinking through now that I can't sleep at night.
It's interesting you say that, because I do the same thing as far as markup and overhead and all of that. Like I build that into my labor rate, and it's the simplicity of the business that affords that. But essentially it's figuring out like, and like that overhead and that rate all accounts for how much productive work I can put out in a year, which isn't the same as how many hours I work in a year, right? Because I basically assume if I want to be able to charge any job that I'm working for 40 hours a week, I probably can only have my tool belt on for 32 of those 40 hours, but I need to get paid for the 40. So all that adjustment is built into my labor rate, and the way that I'm set up is essentially like I want to ensure that I'm making my rate like I don't want to base my earnings on how much production I put forth with employees. Like I want that to be above and beyond. So even if I were to break even with my employees, they made my life easier. I'm covering the cost of them. I'm like, if I know that I'm working 32 hours of work a week, that I can support my family and make what I want to make. And that's just the way that I structure my business, that it's like, I don't necessarily need to worry, do I need 2-3 people on this job to be able to support me and what I need for a year? And from like a business perspective, when you think of bigger companies, that makes no sense at all. But like, I want to make sure that I'm making my money on me and on, if I'm working, that I know I'm going to hit my numbers in a year. And that's how it's very similar to what you did. It's like, basically, if people are working, I know that like if I'm working, I know that I'm profitable. Like it's guaranteed.
Yeah.
And that actually has made life, work, and business way less stressful. Also, realizing that I'm not going to be productive for 40 hours a week unless I work 50 hours a week.
Yep, that's exactly right. Yep, for sure. Do y'all think that in your area, is carpentry underpaid in relationship to the other trades, or is it kind of equivalent?
Like
Like,
specialty trades are going to make more because near us it's like a licensing thing.
okay, because yeah, like electricians, plumbers, HVAC, those guys around here are probably charging twice of what the average carpenter is charging, but yet overhead wise and knowledge wise and skill wise, I think it's probably the same. And that's why a lot of guys in carpentry, I think, are it's just so hard for them because for whatever reason, the standard is like, hey, you're a carpenter, so you don't charge much money. Obviously, some of them don't need to because they're not very good, but even the good ones, I'll talk to them. They're like, man, it's so hard. I can't make enough money, all this, that, and the other. But then I do this whole like profitability analysis, realize, well, this is why I'm not making money because I'm not charging enough for my work. And then, I'm like, oh, this is about the same rate that the local electricians and the plumbers and all of these guys are charging who've got trucks and crews and about the same overhead that I have. And I just think it's interesting that if I give someone an hourly rate of the same as what a plumber or an HVAC guy would be, they freak out. But if a plumber or electrician gives them that rate, they're like, oh yeah, that's just normal, no problem. And I didn't know if it was like that up there.
I think it's pretty consistent, but I think one of the issues is that a carpenter it becomes a generalized term where it's like, if you're a stair builder or a fine woodworker or like more specialty carpentry, it's almost as though it would make sense that a stair builder gets paid $100 an hour versus 75. So I think that there is a little optics around that where, you just assume that a plumber can do, like complicated plumbing, but it's, but that's not always the case. You're usually getting a plumber rate and an apprentice rate, and that's it. They're generalized that way. And carpentry is just on the other end of it because a general carpenter, might be lower skilled. And then you're saying, well, yeah, but this carpenter can build a set of stairs. It's like, okay, well, they're not the same, and we're calling them the same. I think also there's the romanticism that is in a lot of us in terms of what we do, and quote unquote complaining about the fact that we don't get paid appropriately. It's like, well, are you? You're probably not marketing yourself very well. And for a lot of guys, that's just not their strong suit. You said something earlier about, being worried about overcharging for your market and having to do some research and make sure that you were charging appropriately and you weren't going to outprice yourself for projects. That's a delicate balance because on one hand, you want to be marketable and you want to be able to take on the work that you want. But on the other hand, you kind of want to be the most expensive guy because you're going to do the best. And
the problem is like getting the rate that you should oftentimes put you outside of the competing market rate.
But that's what I mean. It's like you're either going to approach this where you're going to compete, or you're going to have to, or you're going to approach it in a way that, how do I set myself apart where it's like you demand a premium for it.
Correct. It's funny because I have the conversation with so many people where it's like, I'm going to tell you how to figure out like what your rate needs to be per hour in a year very quickly. And then you're going to figure out like how much that's going to cost per day, per week. And then at that point, you're going to realize it's way higher than what you're charging now. And so you have to either do market research to figure out, can my market support and bear this rate? Is there a happy medium, or how do I develop a new market to really bear this rate? Because at the end of the day, if you're not getting that rate and you just figured this out, you're not making the money that you ideally want to in business and should be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That's super true. Cause I think that, when, I've got guys that are kind of like our quote unquote competition in regard to installation around here, and a lot of them are good guys and like they do good quality work, but they just they haven't figured out that they're not charging enough. And so that's who I'm. So I'll tell you a short story about last year. So last year was the toughest year in business I've ever had. Um, we I'd say about the last year and a half. So a shop that I worked for about maybe 12 years doing all of their work. When I went through all of this process and realized I had to raise my rates, I had conversations with them about it and all of my other clients who I worked with, and they um, they kept using us for probably about a year or so. And then they found some guys who basically would do it for cheaper. And so I ended up losing all of their work when it was about probably 50% of what we did. And then something similar happened to another designer that we were working for. We ended up losing them. We picked up some work for another kitchen designer. They ended up closing their business down. And so it was like everything just got knocked out from under me. Ton of anxiety last year, related a lot to what you've talked about before, Tyler. And it was really, really hard because these guys who are doing it for cheaper still do a decent job, and the guys who are hiring them are like, hey, these guys are cheaper, even though they'll say, hey, y'all are the best around. It's still not enough, and that's basically when we decided to start to sell cabinets, so we could kind of go out on our own, control the whole process.
But let's talk about that for a minute, because that's a great point, that the guys that are doing it cheaper are doing a pretty good, say they're doing an A job and you're an A plus, right? It's like, well, what that's saying is that the value is in the A. The value is in the fact that they do a good enough job, however you want to describe it. And the end user or the builder or the client doesn't see the value in paying a premium to get that extra, 5-10%. And, a couple things here. Number one, like, obviously we would hope that the guy that is doing it cheaper is, charging appropriately to support his family. And not that you can knock on that guy's door and be like, hey man, listen, you really need to charge more because I don't want to see you not be able to support your family. I also want to be competitive with you.
Right.
and I know that is part of what we deal with, is these guys that they don't charge appropriately, and they're charging such a cheap rate that it's impossible to compete with. But the other side of that is, all right, well, let's pretend that they do charge enough to support their life. They're totally comfortable. They live a simple life. They don't need to charge more, and they do an A job, and that's what the client values. Okay, well, if you want to charge 10, 20, whatever percent more, then there needs to be more value, right? It's not just about getting 10% better. It's what else can you bring to the client that is going to demand, the additional cost, where it's like that. And that's hard. Like, that's hard. But I think in a lot of conversations I have with clients, a lot of times we get hired because of the experience and the communication effort, and and the way that we're going to approach working with the client and being collaborative. There's value in that, and frankly, our clients pay a premium for that. And it's and they can, if we're being compared, like, hey, this guy is less expensive than you, but we know that we're going to have a better experience working with you. And not every client is going to value that. And that's where it's okay. Well, I totally get the fact that there's a competitiveness to the market, but this is where it's, well, then be more competitive with yourself and understand, all right, let's go find the clients that do value paying a premium, but because I bring XYZ, not just because I get it, the job to be 5 to 10% better, which frankly no one notices except for you.
But so that's like the struggle, I believe, in what Charles is experiencing is the difference between a subcontractor and a general contractor, where I feel that sell, like the A+ is really only attainable through going direct to the customer. Like it's really hard. I think it's harder to convince a general contractor to spend the extra money going from A to A+, generally speaking, because it's good enough and it's going to save their budget and protect their bottom line. Where like the A+ type of work is almost a sell to the customer. Like it's finding the customer that wants that. As a builder, you have that opportunity, or a general contractor, I don't feel that you have as good of an opportunity doing that as a subcontractor.
I mean, that's fair. I think, it's just, but it is just changing the value proposition to say the builder. And I think like, we run into it as well, where we look at a project and then we basically decide, all right, are we using our A+ team on this job, or can we use a lesser team, that does a good job, but it's good enough. It doesn't need to be, an A+. There's, each job is different. And when you work with someone that might be an A player or maybe even a B player, all right, what are the things that we're lacking? And that might, for a lot of builders, I think, for your sake, right? For you could come in and be like, hey, listen, I do charge a little bit more. I'm going to be your A+ player, but I'll guarantee that, I'll deliver the project on time. The builder might not care about that. Builder's like, dude, you're not in my critical path, and frankly, if you're not going to deliver it on time, I'm just going to scream at you until you get it done, and you're going to get it done on time. And the guy over there, I know I can push him. I can tell him to bring additional people, and they'll come in and get it done on time too. Not a value to me. And I think that this, Tyler, you're totally right. Like in the sense that, I think it's definitely easier to quote unquote sell that to the end user. But I do think that there's a world where being a really powerful subcontractor, can be a value add to a general contractor or a builder. And it's just a matter of like answering what is their struggle.
Right, exactly. And I think that you're correct. And our I guess pitch towards the general contractor would be, we make your life easier because we take on a project management role, and you don't have to mess with stuff. We're checking mechanical locations, we're checking plumbing, electrical, appliance specs, doing the layout, all that stuff. So it's like easier on you. And then, but if we
so here I am, I'm the builder. It's like, yeah, that all sounds great, but like you should be doing that anyway. Right. And until like, I'm talking about like the first time we work together, you come in, hey, we handle project management. We'll come in, we'll do cabinet layout. We'll confirm mechanicals. It's like, dude, why? My cabinet layout's perfect. I've put all the mechanicals exactly where they need to be. I don't need you charging me 10% because you're going to check that stuff. I'll do it.
I need to come work with you, Nick. Nobody around here does that.
No, but hear me out. Like, I'm going to tell you I do that, but I might not.
Right.
And the point is like, you're trying to, what it is you're basically adding a service to your proposal to get me to pay more. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying these are the challenges. This is a great conversation because it's like both sides, right? And until, Charles, I let you on my job site and you execute for me, I'm not going to know if I even care about your extra, supervision and project management. I'm not. But when you if somehow you convince me, hey, let me do one job, I'll do it 10% less. Let me do one. If I do a good job, I want 10% on the next one. Okay. All right, let's run this. Let's run through this. You come in, you do your check, you do your mechanical layout, you install a cabinetry, you end up with panels that are incorrect, doors that are the wrong size, hinge boards on the wrong side. You never call me. You let me know that stuff came in wrong. You ordered it, you corrected it, you installed it, kitchen's installed, done. Holy shit. This guy took care of everything. he ran into issues. It was never an issue. It didn't come back to me. He didn't point blame. He didn't yell. He didn't tell me he can't install it because the bow vent's in the wrong spot. He just took care of it.
Mm-hmm.
Now I see value.
Mm-hmm.
But that is, but you're in the beginning of that conversation, you're banking your value on the potential unknown or the potential that I screwed something up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like, no, man, I'm perfect. Everything's right where it needs to be. Don't tell me that you're charging me 10% because you're assuming that I have it wrong, because I'm assuming I have it right.
Right. Yeah. 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 That makes a lot of sense. We try to couch it in the sense of just having another set of eyes on everything to double check.
I get it.
But it's like, I mean, like you said, that it reminded me of an install we did for a guy several years ago. And I kind of had this conversation with him about like, hey man, we usually charge hourly. We don't know what all your job's going to take. He's like, I was like, we always end up having to move outlets and plumbing has to be moved and all this extra stuff. He's like, no, my job's not. I check all that stuff. Like, man, first job we did for him was like 5 outlets have to be moved and all this. And I'm like, dude, after I agreed to a fixed price on it, of course.
Great negotiation on his part.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. But I think that maybe not every trade should have should meet with a homeowner. Obviously, your drywaller doesn't need to meet with a homeowner, but some of the more important trades, maybe millwork being one, because it's so much in the life of the customer. Mm-hmm. I think allowing the owners to be allowing your millwork, if you say you're considering 2 different companies for millwork for a project, allowing your customer to meet with them and say, hey, I think this person would do the best job based on X, Y, or Z. Could then kind of, as a builder, let me just see what you think about this, but it kind of puts off the decision on them to decide, I'm going to spend more money on, 323 versus 427 over here, cabinetry, because I believe that they can execute the job the best, instead of just having like the builder just trying to hit the number and there's no communication with the homeowner. So I don't know.
I mean, I feel like that's my argument, where you just have to go direct to consumer, or it would make your life easier.
I agree. I do agree that it oftentimes makes your life easier. My point is that this role works a lot and primarily with general contractors. Mm-hmm. And and I think like we always, at the end of the day, like the whole psychology behind selling is getting that person to understand what value you're bringing to them. Mm-hmm. Not and you saying like I do the layout, I check mechanicals. It's like all you're telling me is how you're making your job easier for you. And that doesn't, to me, like, that's not valuable to me. Because, like I said, because of the example of like my job's perfect. I don't believe that anything's wrong. Mm-hmm. And so I guess where I'm going, like what I'm trying to get to is, well, what is the value add for you to be a premium if we've never worked together? And what are those things that I'm going to look at where it's, how do I consider choosing a trade? Plaster, let's use plaster, for example. Mm-hmm. I know no one else in the freaking country plasters, but
nope,
I do.
Not down here.
I do. Well, we do. I don't do it. But that's a good example where it's like we have a lot of guys that do a good job, and that's the baseline. Like it's just, that's what we are typically doing. But for us, when we have the liberty and the opportunity, oftentimes it's, there's always a cost with it. There's a big premium, but we want to work with Colby from Trowel, who does what is essentially near perfect plaster, meaning like they're not using a 14-inch knife blade to spread this. They're using 12-foot straight edges and screeding it across a string line. I mean a reference point. But there's a premium to that. So it's like, okay, well, why would I use him when everyone else, can accomplish, something that works, that's 90% of the way there, and no one sees that last 10%. Well, I can't always, but what's the value to it? It's like, well, hey, we have all recessed fixtures in this home, and there's trimless lights and a ton of millwork, and really really flat ceilings that have reveals everywhere. It's like, okay, well, now like you're changing where the value is. It's not so much about the flatness of the wall, it's more about understanding what's true plumb, flat, and square.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you accomplish that? It's like, well, you accomplish it by spending more time and delivering a better product, and that's the only way you are able to accomplish that level of detail. Where, let's bring it back to millwork. It's like, okay, well, what are we dealing with in terms of millwork, and what's the how do we get, what's the deal behind the extra 10%? It's like, well, is it really intricate millwork? Is it all pre-finished? Is it made in Italy and you have one shot and you can't order another filler? It's like, you start realizing, how much risk you're taking on an install. It's like, well, you start putting in higher price point cabinetry or more specialty cabinetry or things that are difficult to manufacture or get, or an island that is grain matched across 14 feet. It's like, you can't really mess a door up. You got one shot to do this.
Yep.
And it's that, so now you're essentially paying for like risk mitigation.
Right. Yep, exactly. And I think that, a lot of our value is that when we're talking to people, we say, hey, we're not going to be the best fit for every job, but there's some jobs that we're going to be the best fit for, like the jobs that you described, where you've got very detailed millwork, tight reveals everywhere. Everything's got to tie in and reference off of something else. Like, that's really our specialty. But if you've just got, a little kitchen that needs to be put in that, it's the homeowner just needs it done fast, then we're probably not going to be the best fit. But if it's trying to find that ideal client, and not just be, it's taken me a long time to realize that not every customer is my ideal customer, and really trying to find those people that value what we do, that value our communication, our attention to detail, our problem solving skills, and not worrying about not being upset about the other jobs that we don't get.
So are you selling your cabinets to builders now, or to consumers, or both?
It's kind of both. Our target right now is builders, architects, interior designers. But we have some individuals that have reached out to us as well. The type of projects that we really like to do are going to be, more architecturally driven. And so typically a homeowner is not going to come directly to us, but we'll do smaller projects as well to fill in between the bigger ones.
So what's the process look like as far as putting your name on the table for designing a kitchen, supplying a kitchen, and then installing a kitchen? Like, how does that start for you? What's that process look like?
Yeah, so we couch everything in a story. So we first send out a questionnaire. We call it our project prologue. People fill it out, and it kind of vets the client. They answer some questions in regard to what things are valuable to them, in regard to professionalism, quality, attention to detail, price. Asks a budget question, gives some ranges of numbers. What do you expect your cabinetry investment to be in these ranges? We get that from them, and that'll tell us up front whether that person's going to be a good fit or if their expectations are way off. Once we get that from them, then we go and we'll have a meeting with usually the homeowner and the interior designer or builder, depending on the project. And we will, we kind of have 4 chapters. So the first one is the estimating phase, where we'll go through and just get some rough information to make sure that we are in the ballpark of what they're wanting to spend on cabinetry.
And is there any sort of plan in place for the kitchen right now from like architect or interior designer?
Depends on the job. So sometimes I'll get drawings sent to me, architectural drawings. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're terrible. Yesterday, I went and looked at a project. There are no drawings except for we want our kitchen to be pretty much like our current kitchen. We're going to replace it and maybe move some stuff around. So, it really depends on the project, and like I said, sometimes, there's a job we've been looking at on and off for over a year it's really big. And the architects like from California, and so it's taken forever to get elevations, and they kept wanting pricing like based only on plan view. And so I'm just kind of making stuff up, rough numbers, and then they're like, well, here's a few elevations. Okay, well, that price just completely changed because everything is just over the top designed. So sometimes the drawings are helpful, so it depends on how detailed
So then
they are.
if you're at this estimating stage,
Mm-hmm.
what's the conversation at that point? Because I would assume that you want to protect yourself from doing a ton of work for no reason.
Exactly. So if it is an individual, a homeowner that's not going through a designer, a builder, somebody we work with a lot, then I will charge $200 to go on site for a consultation. And that's just kind of to help eliminate the tire kickers.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's a builder or somebody we work with a lot, I don't charge that because I'm wanting to, maintain they're feeding us work. And so I don't want to, hit them with that all the time.
How many people object to that?
The site consultation fee, I don't think anybody has,
So
like
you should raise it.
an individual.
So you need to charge more.
Okay. I think I have had one person say it did help me because I was like, hey, it's $200. And then they were kind of like, let's get some more information. So here's kind of what I'm wanting to do and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, dude, you're wanting to do this built-in thing. It's going to be at least $10,000. Oh yeah. My budget's like $2,000. Okay. Well, I'm glad we didn't make a visit to your house. It's,
I say that because, out of all of those consultations, I would be curious at how many you get paid for the $200. That's great.
mm-hmm.
But out of those, how many are then converting?
Yeah. So it's been interesting. I've had a couple, I would say, because most of our stuff is coming through a designer or somebody I know,
mm-hmm.
I've only had, I don't know, it's just been a handful that we've actually charged a consultation fee. And I would say half of them haven't moved forward and the other half have.
So what are the deliverables with that consultation fee?
So that is to go on site, meet with the homeowner, understand their scope of work, basically what they're wanting to do, review with them any drawings that they have, see the space, get some pictures and rough measurements. It's basically to cover my time for a couple of hours. But for them, what it's providing is for us to get enough information to be able to give them a ballpark estimate. And then I tell them that if they decide to move forward, that $200 is deducted from our design and engineering retainer. So if they move forward, I'm subtracting it from the next phase of the project. But if they don't, then it's non-refundable.
So what are you using to develop that initial preliminary estimate on your end?
Okay. So what I'm doing right now is I'm using some average per box pricing from our manufacturing partners. And so I'm just counting the number of boxes, and there's an average per box price for like inset, custom face frame, semi-custom over frameless, et cetera, et cetera. And so I've got a spreadsheet where I'll just say, okay, 23 cabinet units, which is either a box or like a big panel or something. Mm-hmm. Count that up, multiply it out, put in our markup, figure up and about how long we think it's going to take for install, plug that number in, delivery, taxes, and then I'll usually give them I'll take that number and I'll split it and give them a range of like plus or minus 10% or so of that.
What's your bare minimum for any sort of kitchen that you would like not go below that threshold for supplying cabinets, obviously handling design and installing?
For a kitchen or like
Yeah.
any cabinet job at all?
No, like a kitchen.
I don't think that we could do a kitchen for probably less than 50,000 if it was a really small kitchen.
Yeah.
Is typically what I'll tell folks. So if they come in, they're like, "Hey, I want to remodel my kitchen," and they check the $10,000 to $30,000 range, I'm like, okay, either they have more money and they're willing to spend it if they're educated, or their budget's way too low and we can recommend someone else.
Sure. So you're saying it's basically, if anyone wants to hire you to design and install their kitchen, it's going to be a minimum of $50,000.
Yeah, probably so.
Which I think that's like something that people don't understand, the importance of that foot in the door pricing, because even that alleviates 75% of the leads that you get. Where it's like, if you just tell somebody, where they're like, I don't know what it's going to cost. And like, you don't even have to give them a high number. Just be like, hey, we haven't done a kitchen that's been less than 50 grand in 5 years. And like, that's going, you're not putting yourself in a corner. You're protecting yourself. You're not giving them anything more than they need than just like, hey, if you want to hire us, it's going to be a minimum of 50. I don't care how small your kitchen is or how big it is. And I think that saves you so much work and so much conversation in the long run. Like, it's so important for people to understand, what's my base number for doing any of the type of projects that we do.
You know, Tyler, like I had this conversation recently with my coach, and we were talking about ideal client, and what you just said is something that I struggled with, where they were like, what's your bare minimum? And I'm like, well, that's kind of hard. And I like, let's play this 50,000 out, right? It's like, what's your bare minimum kitchen? It's like, well, 50,000. It's like, and then there's like this but, and it's like, but if someone came to me and it was like a super cool $35,000 kitchen, hell yeah, I'm doing it. It's like, no, and what I struggled with is like, I couldn't get to that number. I couldn't get to, this is my minimum and this is where I want to be. And finally he was like, Nick, shut up. Like, we're trying to develop your ideal client.
Yeah.
You're always going to have someone that's going to come in behind and be like, hey, I know I'm not your ideal, but I got this really cool $35,000 kitchen. And you can look at it and decide, do you want to do it or not?
And you can still use that information to make your decision on
100%. And for me, it was always like, but am I going to shut them out? Like, if I say 50 grand's my minimum, they're going to be like, oh no, like I can't work with Nick. And he's like, no, they're going to try to, they'll be like, I can do 37. I can do 40. It's like, how do I work with, like, you're developing your ideal client. And, I think it's just important to note, like, I know a lot of people struggle with that. I would assume they do, because I do, is that you set that ideal, and you're going to still have the people that are quote unquote under that ideal situation still coming to you. But you're essentially setting up this parameter for someone to fit and essentially remove themselves, without you having to have a $200 consultation. And they're just like, oh, okay, his minimum kitchen's 50 grand. Like, I'm not even close to that.
And it's not even that hard to determine. You could look at bathrooms, you could look at whatever it may be. It's like, look at average, like, know your rate, know what all your overhead, figure it out, and figure out on average, like, how long, what's the quickest that you can do something like that, and figure out what the least expensive, the type of cabinetry or whatever the product that you want to sell. It's not hard to get that bottom line pricing, where it's like, now you're setting your market, you're vetting customers, like, you're giving yourself the best opportunity to make the money that you need to with your business.
I've got a friend who's like, has a cabinet shop, and they're like, I won't do anything for less than $2,000, because people are always walking and be like, I need a hinge, $2,000.
Yeah.
Like, I need a door. He's like $2,000. He's like, by the time I spend all this time messing with this darn hinge, it's gonna cost $2,000. And he's like, it's just, either just do it out of charity and give it to him for free, it's got to be $2,000.
It's true. So after this initial ballpark estimate, at that point, you're looking to sign them up for like an actual design.
Yeah. So at that point, we have our design and engineering agreement. And that we tell people is like roughly 10% of the estimate, depending on the complexity of the job. And that's a non-refundable retainer, but we subtract it from the final proposal. But basically that covers all of our time for doing designs and detailed field measurements and meeting with them. The biggest thing is design. So our designs are more detailed than anybody else that I know, because we literally draw everything in SketchUp in 3D.
Yeah.
We've had to install off of 2020 plans for so many years, and they're absolutely terrible. And it's just like, they don't give the level of detail that we need. And we're working on a job right now that it's like, we had a little bitty print of some 2020 plans, like a plan view, that we couldn't understand how some fillers were coming together in a corner. Now we get out on site, get the cabinets, and realize that where the two fillers butt together in the corner, you only have 11/16 of fillers showing, which means that once you put hardware on the adjacent drawers, this drawer is going to hit the hardware. And so now it's like, what are we doing? Are we cutting down a cabinet? Are we cutting out sheetrock to push, because it's trapped between two cabinet runs? And so it's just stuff like that is in 2020 that it just doesn't have the level of detail we need. So we literally will draw everything in SketchUp and then do really detailed submittals to just make sure that the customer knows what they're getting, because we've just had so many issues with surprises on site, where we get on site and the customer's like, well, I didn't know it was going to be like that. And I'm like, well, I can understand why, because your drawings suck.
Yeah. Are you able to send your SketchUp drawings, your 3Ds, to your cabinet manufacturers to be able to do their acknowledgments?
No. So that's where
that would be sick.
Yes, that would be. So I actually do have one. They don't have a dealer network, but they're a local shop. So it's interesting. The guy who I used to work for at the cabinet shop, the high-end cabinet shop, he does like full-time drawings and stuff now for cabinet shops, and even like, I mean, they'll even design hotels and all this stuff, but he only uses SketchUp. Mm-hmm. It's crazy. And but he does, for this one shop, he does their drawings, he does all the submittals, so the thing is fully rendered in 3D, does all the submittals, and then programs all of their CNCs so that they just drop plywood on it and it cuts everything out. And then he'll even have sometimes like videos in SketchUp of showing like, this is how this goes together, and this is how you put this together in the field. I mean, it's amazing. And so I'm subbing to them to do some of our drawings for the bigger stuff, and then doing some of the smaller stuff myself.
And that's one of the issues that I find, where it's like, okay, so I'm going to hire somebody to do like preliminary kitchen design, kitchen layout, because that's not what I want to do. I don't want to learn like the fundamentals of kitchen design and flow and how so it's like, hire somebody to do that, and then I'm getting like a basic takeoff at that point. Then I'm going and I'm redlining everything, and then I'm drawing anything that's not standard, so that when I submit that to the manufacturer, it's priced and acknowledged in the appropriate way. And then they're sending me back an acknowledgement on that. Then I'm having to go back to my red line drawings and ensure that their acknowledgement matches up and took into account everything that I wanted. And then I'm ready to actually get the final pricing and then place an order. And I'm like, this is a lot of work, and it seems like a lot of redundancy.
Yeah.
And like, am I just, and I even asked the one lady I work with, and she's like, it's probably not necessary for you to do all that. Like, it'll come back messed up here and there, and like, you'll be able to fix it or get something new. And I'm like, that's what I'm trying to avoid. And it's almost as if it's unavoidable.
Oh my goodness.
Can I introduce the conversation of AI right now? Because
go for it.
Thank you. This is what this. I had a conversation with a client today, and he's in the AI space, and we were talking about AI, and we talked about with Ben Ueda on the podcast before, and I don't remember if he talked about this specific program, but he's involved with this thing called Skip Renovation. Do you know it, Charles?
Mm-mm.
Skip Renovation is this is going to sound like an ad, and it's absolutely not. But it's one of the AI platforms that is centered around kitchen design right now. And
Okay.
you literally go in and add your information, and you can basically say, hey, I have a 10 by 14 room. I have a window here, a door here. This is my existing kitchen layout. I haven't used it, so I'm paraphrasing, but then it will essentially spit out like infinite kitchen layout options, and you just decide which one you want. And then from there,
Huh.
it's like, all right, cool. So you like this layout. What are you thinking for cabinet style? And it was like, well, what about white shaker? No, let's do this. Let's do that. Let's do that. And you have all of these options. And within a matter of minutes and based on your prompts, will spit you out a photorealistic rendering. And I believe, I could be stand corrected, but I believe it will also either connect you with local professionals, or it will give you a rough order of magnitude for pricing based on what you've input for what that cabinetry should cost. And my point in bringing this up is listening to like the process in ordering cabinetry and drawing all these details is it it becomes so human input. Like there's so much
Mm-hmm.
human input that now, like Tyler, exactly what you just said, like, yeah, stuff is going to end up wrong because despite you drawing it and giving them the detail, like then you're relying on someone to understand that and then communicate it to the staff in the office, to the staff in the manufacturing plant, and so on and so forth, and then get on the truck. And where this whole example of Skip Renovation, it's like you're simplifying the process, and it's literally you're just like extruding parts and pieces, and then it knows what information needs to be pumped out at that point, where it's like, hey, you're and it's also getting you to the start line faster, because instead of trying to figure out the layout and drawing things, it's just giving you 150 different options within a matter of seconds, and something's going to stick, and you can run with that. And what I don't think is there yet, and what I'm the most interested in, especially with like the side of our company, like Materia Millwork, is that Ken and I talk a lot about what we want to build, and we are given plans for millwork by a builder, a designer, a client, whatever. And oftentimes they're designed within the parameters of their own knowledge, right? And it's
Mm-hmm.
usually like based on like, hey, let's do a micro shaker, 4-inch kick, recessed. And it's the same thing over and over and over. But then when we share inspiration, it's this like wildly, interpreted millwork that is just thought differently. And my where I'm going is like being able to take something like AI and be able to get to the start line of, hey, this is how the layout works, and here's generally what you're trying to do, and here are all your box sizes. But then having the ability to kind of poke and prod and pull and extend and start tweaking that design in real time, and allowing what that input is for, like, say, cabinet box. It's like, yeah, but I would love for that to be rounded. It's like, okay, well, a computer can tell you that in order to make that rounded, you'd have to do XYZ.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
and I think one of the most powerful parts of this, and this is where this conversation with the client went today, is that you're getting to these photorealistic renderings immediately.
Right.
And he said it himself. He was like, if we're doing a different project, but he said it himself that there was a point in our project that I lost interest in it, and I was going to pull the plug and not do the project. And in that design meeting was the first time I got to see the photorealistic renderings, and I literally changed my mind, because then I saw it. And it wasn't a print, it wasn't an elevation, it wasn't a 2D drawing. It was, oh my gosh, that's my project, and that's what it's going to look like. And I was like, it makes sense. It's why we render everything. But I've never really considered, how quickly it needs to be presented. And especially with technology nowadays, where it's like, well, the technology's there. Why not get something that is photorealistic to the client as soon as possible? Because now you've delivered the ice cream. Like now they're hooked. You know, they're like, oh, this is great. Like even if it's wrong, it's like that is the potential of what my project could look like. Yeah, sure, we're gonna tweak it and we're gonna mess with it, but it gets them, it hits their highest interest level in a much faster way.
That's a really good point, because I've thought about like the way we're doing it now is I want to draw everything like how it's going to be built, and then I could do a plug-in and render that, because if I take some, like 2020 does a decent job at rendering, but it's just not exact enough in the manufacturing specifications. So then I'm like, well, do I get something like 2020 to throw together just to render a job and then redraw it in SketchUp? And then I feel like I'm doing things twice.
That's
but
pretty much what I do.
Yeah. So then I feel like, but if that's helping me sell the job, then that might be something that needs to be done. And so, you know, is like thinking about AI, Nick, is just what Tyler was talking about. When you're ordering cabinets, it's a language translation issue. So
Of
what
course.
you're having to do is you're
in
having to
so many languages.
Yeah, you're literally converting a picture to words, and then you have to convert the words to the reality, and then we have to fit that into the space. But what happens is that when we have, you know, it's just like Tyler was saying, because there's no way right now, and I think soon there could be with AI, to be able to look at a model and to be able to convert that model into the code to build the cabinet in the manufacturing plant, or to convert it into their ordering software, would be so huge, because it is so much time. Because they're like, if I go to order one cabinet,
I'm just glad it's not me. I feel so
no,
much better.
it's not just you. I mean, it's like you go to order one cabinet, and I have the option, if I'm butting up to a finished end panel, that the standard reveal on this cabinet line is 4 millimeters. So, but if you put two frameless boxes together, you have a 2 millimeter offset on both sides. So that gives you your 4 millimeter gap. If you butt that against a panel, now you've got a 2 millimeter gap against a panel. Well, I can go and choose to make that a 4 millimeter gap instead of a 2 millimeter gap, but I have to remember to do it on everything on the end runs where I'm butting into a panel or I have a finished end. And those are like 1,000 little things just like that in the modifications, where I got to find the cabinet that's close to the size I want, go to the modifications, change the size to modify it to the size that I need, change the reveals, change the height, change the door style. I want the top two drawers to be slab instead of 5-piece or whatever. And you multiply that over 100 cabinets in a job, then you got to get acknowledgments and double check it all to make sure it was done right. Like, it's a lot.
And it is a lot. And you're one person making a dozen selections, and then relying on a bunch of other people to follow behind that. And what that, in my opinion, what that's doing is that, sure, say you nail it and you get the system down, it's just fatiguing because it's requiring you so much input, and the fatigue ends up hindering the potential creativity, in my opinion, is that you never really get to the point of like true creativity, because you're so constrained by the fact that you have to punch numbers in to modify what is existing. And this is where I think like the AI comes into place, and this like real time, you know, rendering and the ability to essentially visualize something in the immediate, where it's like, get it to what you want it to look like, and then allow that to produce the information. The crazy part is all of this technology exists. It's just not being implemented into our industry yet. And good.
Sorry, I disappeared. I dropped my pen. No, and like what you're saying with AI, so essentially what I'm using in place of AI right now is somebody who's doing the 2020 for me, Charles. So like that's the first step for me, is to sell the job based on the renderings that 2020 puts out, which is like, I just pay somebody to do that, and it's not that much money, and I sell the job. And at that point, now it's like, all right, how much time am I going to have between shop drawings, acknowledgments, and everything else on the back end of that cabinet job. So like I am protecting myself up front by not having to invest that much time, like, because like you said with SketchUp, what I would do is I would just be like, all right, so we're going to start with massing, then I'm going to get massing approved, and then I'm going to start layering in details, because I don't want to add all these details and then you change the massing of the cabinets, because now I just spend all this time doing that. So the easiest way for me is like, well, let's get pretty close to what we want with 2020, and then I can go and do everything I need on my end, and I don't necessarily need to change anything on that end. I can explain to them if there's something that may look slightly different, but most of the time they don't know. But it's still a huge pain in the ass.
Yeah. And a big thing is like I hate that little tagline on SketchUp that's like, this is sort of kind of about what it might sort of kind of look like.
Yeah.
And don't look too close. And that's like bitten us in the butt so many times. And I want our drawings to be like, no, this is exactly what it's going to look like. And so that's where I'm trying to go like, okay, if I do the 2020 to SketchUp route, kind of like you're talking about, then the first set is kind of sort of what it's going to look like, but then I got to draw it into actually how it's going to look like. And it's just like, it's just a lot of time is really what it comes down to. And maybe someday AI will just do it all for us, but then it wouldn't be as fun because I enjoy figuring out all the details.
But see, this is my argument, and I know, like, I know I'm going to get a lot of flack for this, but like my argument there is you move your creativity elsewhere. It's the same exact thing as the CNC. Like everyone was like, it was, no, I'm cutting my plywood on a table saw. I trust it. That's my process. The moment you take the time and dial in a CNC to cut all your plywood, prep your hinges, prep your draw slides, it's like, why did I ever do this by hand? It's like, exactly. Because now, instead of spending all that time cutting it on a table saw, now you get to spend more time working with the solid stock and making a more creative, face frame detail, or carving something and adding more detail to something. Because if we look at it in like a pot of money, well, you're just you're shrinking the pot of money that goes to to manufacturing the plywood and moving the rest of that money into the solid stock work. Or you shrink the pot of money and now you sell the same product at a lesser price to more clients. Or it just costs you less and you're selling it at a higher profit. Like those are three positive outcomes as to implementing CNC into the process. It's the same thing here where it's like, okay, if you have a program that you can pull, stretch, do whatever you need rather than draw. We spend thousands of dollars for every kitchen that we do to have the shop drawings done to the level of detail that you were referencing earlier. Yep. Everything is detailed. The way the toe kick is made, the way what spec that little foot is. And I'm sure that the guy doing the shop drawings is copying, pasting from our other drawings, because as he should. He shouldn't draw every foot every time, but he's still drawing every cabinet every time because they're all quote unquote different. But if it got to a point where it's like you could build from what you are intending to build and allowing it to produce the information backwards, great. Now I know I have these boxes, they're this size, this is how they get fabricated, because all of that information has been decided upon way early on, and I don't need to redraw this, and I can get the information I need.
I think the most difficult aspect of bridging the whole language issue, as you referred to it, is all of this has to be done with installation in mind. And I think that's like the one thing that I have the biggest or the most difficult aspect of how are we tying that into this process, where like when I go to do the shop drawings or redline cabinets, in the back of my mind, it's being done with how this is going to get installed to make sure. And like, these are all things that you can leave out, like you said, or make mistakes. And then you have to make field modifications or make your life more difficult. But it's like, that's the part that I'm not sure we will ever, like, I think that we can cover a lot of this, but at the end of the day, there's information that may not be able to be provided, where it's like, this needs to come apart this way so that I can install this piece first and then this one. And if you're not that deeply involved with the design process to understand that, it's hard to pick up on that. Like you'll probably just miss that if this shit gets spit out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which it's neither here nor there. And I think it's the same thing. It gets us really close. But it is, I always feel, and that's why like I typically don't get built-ins made. I'll make them myself because there's always these weird constraints that by the time I draw them up, I'm like, somebody's gonna fuck this up and it's just not worth it. Like
Right.
I'd rather just do it myself because I don't want to wait 12 weeks and then have it come in and it be wrong because it wasn't made exactly how I needed it made.
Like
And
that
it was
pipe
really critical to have it be made that way.
It's like that pipe I drew on the drawing was like, I wanted you to build the cabinet around it, not have a cabinet with a pipe running through it.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's like you can lead the horse to water, but there's just so many variables where like I don't know. I think that's what makes a good kitchen design. And for all those people who asked me like about my last project and all the issues that I was having with cabinet package and everything else, it's all of this stuff. It's basically that an architectural plan was taken and cabinets were made from that. There was no consideration for anything other than what this looks like on a floor plan. And those are every single thing that we're discussing and speaking of. There was just nothing put into it more than that. There was no shop draw. Nothing was right and signed off on. And that's okay in certain circumstances and certain projects, but that's not what I want to do, and that's not what I expect to do, and probably what you guys don't want to do either. But yeah, I mean, I've never gone into it about what the specifics of what was going on, but it's this, like, it's all this stuff that takes time to do was not done.
Well, this is my favorite thing to talk about because of my background in installation. It's really kind of our focus, and we've kind of rebranded and I'm trying to be consistent in calling ourselves fitters instead of installers now because we wear Snickers pants, so therefore we have to be European, But I really think it describes more of what we do in that you're trying to fit a cabinet to an irregular space that was made in a perfect environment, and instead of just screwing something to the wall. And there are 3 equal components to a successful project, in my opinion, and that is 1, design, 2, fabrication, and 3, installation or fitting. And those are equally important, and one of them can severely mess up the other one. And you can have a poorly designed cabinet that can be somewhat made up for in the field if you have a really good installer. Or you can have a bad installer really screw up some cabinets that were well designed and well built. But I think one of the reasons that we really wanted to try to start selling cabinets ourselves is that we can see that whole process from the end in mind. So we're looking at when I'm drawing and when the guys who I have drawing for me, like we all used to work together, build cabinets, install cabinets, like we think the same. So they're thinking about, and I'm thinking about, how is this going to be installed? How does it need to be engineered in such a way so that it can be installed as efficiently as possible, but also that, you don't have like weird components hanging out. And it's like, for instance, I'm designing a little bar right now, and it's got a Sub-Zero wine cooler and an ice maker right next to each other. And you have to have a panel between the two. And I don't want to see the panel. So I'm pushing the panel back 3/4 of an inch, and I'm extending the door of the Sub-Zero wine cooler over the front of the panel so that you still have an 1/8 inch reveal between the wine cooler door panel and the ice maker door panel. And it's stuff like that if you don't have installation experience of putting on all these different brands of appliance panels and understanding how they integrate and how they work and which ones work and don't work, like used to people would get a KitchenAid and want to put a panel on it and get mad that it stuck out an inch from the cabinets in order for the door to work. And it's like, nope, you got to get a Scotsman or a Sub-Zero. If you want that door to be flush, you're going for a sleek inset look, and you just put this an ice maker that's just not going to work. And it's because people just don't have, the experience. And when you're able to know all of that from the front end, it makes designing with the installation in mind, like I feel like the project flows so much better because I'm, at a job we're doing right now, I was pulling wiring for all of our Hayfla lighting before sheetrock that already has all the connectors on it, so that when we hang the cabinets, we're just like plug and go, and we're not soldering stuff in the field and all of that jazz. And those are things that if I'm just installing, that we usually don't have the opportunity to do. And so,
but I mean, and this goes back to the conversation where it's like, how do you sell this to the end user? And like, what's that end user look like? Because at the end of the day, most contractors probably are not going to care in this ice maker wine fridge situation where it's like, okay, I see a panel between them, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
then like there's certain people that are going to want that 1/8 inch reveal and look like it's a seamless front, and it's finding who's willing to pay for that and who wants that. And there is a market for that. There is a customer, and it's knowing who that is going into it, because all that takes time. Like the difference between what you're doing and designing that and figuring out how that's going to work and then executing that in the field takes a lot more time than just being like, let's just order 2 different cabinets. We have the cutouts for both the appliances. We're good to go. Let's roll with it.
Right. Yeah. But some of it is time, but I think a lot of it is just experience too, and like field experience. Because, for instance, like if I'm designing that row of base cabinets, it doesn't take me that much longer to bump this panel back 3/4 and pull this one over 3/4, and then decide to order a 10-foot long toe kick with a vent routed in it in front of the ice maker toe, so that I can have one removable toe kick that runs across the whole entire run. Like, that doesn't really take that much longer, but what it does take is it takes experience to understand. Like, for me, it doesn't take a ton of extra time because that's how I think all the time, which is why I don't sleep.
Correct. But like, even that, like the lack of having the foresight to do that it's taken time and it's taken experience over years. And
yes,
like
that definitely
while
has
between the two might not, but to have the business and the mindset that you do has been an investment of a ton of time over a really long time. And like, guarantee you, designing a kitchen with all of these details that you're saying versus somebody who just doesn't think of all of that stuff, the time perspective is going to actually be a lot less. Like I've always said, the better that I get, the longer things take because I'm integrating more details. And like 100%. That's what you're doing. Like this kitchen, everything that you integrate into it's going to take more time than somebody who's just slapping it all. And that who's putting it all together, not having the foresight to implement all of these details seamlessly.
Yeah, not realize that there is a better potential outcome.
Yeah,
but I think the issue. Sorry, Charles. Like the issue is with what you're saying is it's reliant on you, and your knowledge of knowing that you have to use this Scotsman ice maker because the other one won't work, right? Like it really does become individual based, and oftentimes, going back to the earlier conversation, that becomes the value. Like, or at least what we feel, like what you might or I might feel as though the value. It's like, Thermador appliances. I'm just going to say it. Like, I have a ton of issues with them. I can't. I've installed way too many with way too many issues, and so but that's based on my experience, right? So now when I see a Thermador spec, I'm like, hey, we either got to switch that or we need to use something else, and that's based on experience, and what the reality is collective experience is better. If you were in a room, if the three of us were designing a kitchen together, it would be more efficient and we'd have more knowledge going into it. And that's kind of where the conversation of AI and computer comes into place, where it's like when you have the ability to take information and digest it and understand the factual context of what you're dealing with, and leveraging that, where it's like, hey, that ice maker will work, but you won't get the outcome because it doesn't fit. That, like, that's where all of this stuff comes into play, is that it becomes this, it becomes a bigger collection of information, being able to funnel and focus on the individual task, and become less reliant on experience. Because our experiences change, our experiences, are different. Our experiences, are we have different opinions on them. And, when the reality is we're just trying to accomplish a result.
It almost, like, you're reliant on volume to be able to create a standard that's repeatable with your business. Like, if you did 100 kitchens a year, like, this would be your standard, and your cabinetry, like, people would come to you because these are your kitchens and this is what they look like, and these are the standard details. But most of us don't have a business that affords us the opportunity to design and produce 100, 200, 1,000 kitchens a year, where it's like, this is a Duval kitchen, and it's because of all these details that everyone knows the standards on, which
it's a great
is somewhat
example.
of a shame.
It's a great example, because I forget who said it on an earlier episode, but they were talking about, teaching a good site super. And one of the best things that they could do is get into the production world, where it's like you're watching a foundation be poured every single day. You're turning over a house every single day. You're just flying through the process. So you get to see, 365 foundations go in a year, where it's like the guy that's in the custom world, he sees one foundation every 2 years.
Right.
So by the time he gets to the next foundation, not only has his mind not been in that world, but things have changed and code has changed, and you need all these other things, and and it's a different style foundation. I think you're spot on, Tyler. Is like, it's you become reliant on how much volume you can do in order for you to become efficient, which I think is why, going back to something we talked about earlier, is like, which is why a lot of us struggle to charge the necessary premium as a custom cabinet maker, because the reality is we're doing these one at a time, and we never really have the opportunity to create massive efficiency.
Or systems.
Where you look at a giant manufacturing plant, that builds cabinets just literally around the clock. Sure, maybe their quality is not as good as yours, but I bet it could be. And they're choosing to hit a different price point in a different market that more people want to buy. So they're going to hit the middle market. But if you said, hey, if we just tweak a couple things and we can only serve the luxury market, I'm sure that they could refine and still produce dozens of kitchens a day, and at the quality standard that a smaller percent of the population would buy.
Yeah. And that's, that is the way our manufacturing partners that we use, they do have standards. And so they'll have, like, this is their standard construction for a drawer stack. This is their standard construction for an upper cabinet and all of that. So if you want to simplify it, that's what I'm doing right now, is kind of learning what those standards are. And if I don't have to do special requests on everything, and like, this last job, I had 8 different special requests I had to send in because I wanted like a sink apron front to line up with the drawer fronts that were adjacent to it on an island, because the drawer fronts were 3/16 shorter than the apron on the sink. And I was like, well, that just looks dumb. So, but I had to submit a special request for this sink base to have it like all made just right, so that all of that would line up. And, but they do have standards, and if I can design in such a way so that I can just plug in their standards, they can build that stuff really fast. And that's what they do with they'll have like a semi-custom line, and it doesn't allow you to do all those modifications. You can't do special requests. You've only got like 12 colors that you can pick from. You can make stuff the size that you want, but you can't do the change in the reveals and that kind of thing. And they can get that stuff to me in like 5 to 6 weeks versus, 9 to 10 weeks, because they're just limited on the amount of options that they do. But the box construction is the same. They use the same edge bander. They use the same robot that goes and grabs and drops it on the CNC, the same CNC to cut it. And so it's still a really good product. It's just you're limited on some of your options, and it allows it to be a lot more efficient.
Yeah, one of my least favorite things is when you have the refrigerator cabinet and like the doors above it, and then they have the full height cabinet next to it, and the upper doors don't match the same height as the doors above the refrigerator, and they're like 1.5 inches different.
Oh yeah,
that's such a specific detail.
I feel like you see it all the time, because like they just make whatever height the fridge cabinet is, and then they get like a pantry cabinet next to it, and they have like the defined heights for them. And the doors are like so close that they look close, but they don't look the same. I feel like you see it all the time.
Yeah, that's the worst. This is why I draw everything in SketchUp.
Yeah, so I can see it
so I can
beforehand.
see it. Good night.
Charles, have you done a podcast before?
So I've been on my church's podcast some, but not like this. This is my first, I guess, woodworking business podcast that I've been on.
Well, you've done a great job. I feel like we have more to talk about, but we are coming in on our 2-hour mark. But I would say I really have enjoyed talking to you, and I don't know a lot of people from Mississippi, to be honest, but you're very well spoken, very knowledgeable. You have very cohesive thoughts.
I love that. I love that. That's how you're ending this.
Dude, I don't know. We have how many podcasts have we had? And it's like, it's somebody's first time doing a podcast, or maybe they've had a fair, like, I feel like we didn't skip a beat. You were very engaged, very interactive.
That part.
Oh man, I don't know a lot of people from Mississippi. I think I met you. I didn't realize you were from Mississippi.
The Mississippi caricatures are there for a reason. Okay, yeah. So you ain't telling me anything I don't know.
All right. You must. You're close to the border of Tennessee, though.
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, it was super fun, man. We didn't even talk about how we get all the stuff done when we're stressed out, and we didn't talk about Jesus, and we didn't talk about designer commissions, and man, there's all kind of things we can talk about. So
I know, but yeah, I would love you to follow up with the scheduling department of how you schedule the first one, and hop back on, because I feel like even like your cabinet process, we got through the rough estimate phase 1 and didn't really get past there. So I'd love to.
I probably should finish that before I get back on.
Yeah.
Charles, I'll
figure
second
that out.
I'll second that. I would love to get back. I would love to get you back on, because I did want to talk about Jesus and your faith and how that plays into business.
Yeah, for sure.
I find it super interesting. And, someone just truthfully, like, I'm not very faith-based, and it's not something I practice. And, I'm always curious to hear the other side, the other perspective. So yeah. Let's do it.
Absolutely.
Let's get you back on the schedule here, and we'll keep chatting.
Yeah, that sounds great. It's super fun, guys.
Amazing.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Charles, talk to you soon.
All right.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, I feel like we could have talked for 4 hours there, dude.
Yeah, it was great.
I did. I want to dig in. I definitely want to have him back on, because I do want to. I know it's a Southern thing, but in a lot of ways. But the faith, it's on his website. 323 is, 323 Woodwork. It's a what is it? Not a proverb.
I don't know. No, I agree, and I actually just had a
quote out of the Bible.
I just had this conversation with our neighbor's sister about like how I am just not driven by faith, and not like never grew up that way, but I do find it interesting. And I do think that in a lot of ways it would make life easier if you had that outlook, where some days it's just like, yeah, I have nothing to turn to explain what's going on. I've just struggled my whole life.
I think
Trying to like adopt that perspective with my mentality, it's never really checked out for me, but I do find it super interesting.
Yeah, I mean, he said it early in the conversation. He was like, I just let Lord do its thing and do his thing. And I'm like, I wanna understand that thought a little bit more. Like, is it literally like you step back and just kind of let stuff happen, or are you this may sound stupid, but like I am curious about it, or are you just moving forward in a lot and doing what you think is the right thing, but attributing that to guidance from Jesus? I
I
don't
don't
know,
know.
like that's I know, neither do I, and I think that's what I'm kind of interested in understanding. So, all
Up
right,
next.
up next, Jesus Christ, the original carpenter. Guys, thanks for listening. As always, make sure you head over to moderncraftsman.co. I think, Tyler, you've already told them, but we got some stuff up on a Teachable website. We've been sharing some downloads. You guys have asked for documents that we've shared in the past. We've been uploading those. I think we're going to link it to our website, moderncraftsman.co. But if it's not there yet, if you head over to modern-craftsman.teachable.com, you'll find a couple of those documents up there. You can download them. We got a ton of stuff coming up that will be on there. We really want to help be a resource for you guys beyond just this podcast. So Tyler and I are excited to launch. This isn't even launched yet, where you're getting a pre-launch insight. But yeah,
keep your eyes and ears peeled. We're working on it.
See you guys next week.